I'd like to get your take on the Jesus Seminar. This seems to have been the impetus behind a lot of these specials on the last days of Jesus,
Yes.
The rise of Christianity, and so on. These guys seem to have really good PR, but how do they fit into the grand scheme of theology, both in America and Europe? Who are these guys?
Okay, thank you very much for that question as well. The Jesus Seminar represents the radical left-wing fringe of contemporary New Testament scholars. They claim to have about 200 members. Now, that in itself alone would be small because the annual attendance at, say, the Society of Biblical Literature convention each year is around 8,000 to 10,000. And the Jesus Seminar claims 200 members, but in fact, even those 200 members, when you look at it more closely, includes anybody that in any way has a connection with the seminar, such as even being on a mailing list. Most of the members of the seminar have relatively poor credentials. They teach at community colleges or junior colleges. Some of them have published nothing in the field of New Testament studies. There are probably about 14 of them that would represent really good first-rate New Testament scholars. People like Crossan, Funk, Borg, and some of the others. But the viewpoints that they represent do represent a very radical fringe element which is rejected by the majority of New Testament scholars that would meet at, for example, the Society of Biblical Literature meeting. In addition to that, I would say that they are honest, at least, about their presuppositions. In their edition of the 5 Gospels, they state some of their presuppositions, and they state the number one presupposition underlying their work is scientific naturalism. That is to say that miracles are impossible. They say that it is no longer possible to believe in the Christ of creed and dogma once you have seen the heavens through Galileo's telescope. So the whole thing, again, is built into the philosophical presuppositions that miracles are impossible and that a supernatural Christ is out of the question, and therefore naturally you wind up with this human view of Jesus who never made any radical claims, didn't anticipate the coming of the kingdom of God in his person, or any of those things that most critical scholars would affirm about him. If you'd like to see a good critique of the Jesus Seminar, let me mention 2 books. One is a book by Luke Timothy Johnson, who is a New Testament scholar at Emory University, who is not himself an evangelical or a conservative. He would be a kind of middle-of-the-road, moderate, sort of mainstream New Testament scholar. And this book, The Real Jesus, is a caustic denunciation of the Jesus Seminar and their claim to speak as the voice of scholarship. He just really, really rakes them over the coals. He says the whole thing is motivated by a kind of social agenda on the part of Robert Funk, the founder of the seminar, to undermine the view of Jesus that is prevalent in our culture and replace it with this more politically correct, humanistic Jesus that the Jesus Seminar wants to have. And he sees it basically as not disinterested scholarship, but as an overtly social agenda-driven movement. So that's The Real Jesus by Luke Timothy Johnson. For a more conservative critique, from a conservative end, you might look at the book Jesus Under Fire, edited by J.P. Moreland and Michael Wilkins. And it has a wonderful collection of essays from various scholars on things like what did Jesus say, what did Jesus do. There's an opening chapter on your question, who is the Jesus Seminar, who are these men that are in it. I have a chapter in there on John Dominic Crossan and the resurrection of Jesus, where I go into more detail about some of the things I've said here. And it's very, very fine critique, I think, of the Jesus Seminar. So those would be 2 resources if you're interested.